Chapter 3. Representative of the Septian Church. The train barreled on, almost flying through the thick veil of fog. Droplets of water splattered against the window glass, extending out like transparent veins, and continued to wriggle back and forth under the pressure of the swiftly passing wind. Placing the temple of my head against the glass, I stared blankly down at the tickets in my hand and rubbed the two of them together between my fingers. I would be traveling by train to the border city, far south of its imperial cousin, and then to reach the liberal kingdom, I would have to transfer to an airship. Both of my tickets were first class, but not the highest end seats available. The passenger car was nearly at full capacity, but for some peculiar reason, nobody had seated themselves in the space next to mine. As I mused about the empty seat, it occurred to me that Mecht may have purchased the spot ahead of time, leaving it vacant on purpose. There was no doubt in my mind that he was being paid handsomely to make sure this job was done and done well.
Will you be traveling to the liberal kingdom, sir?
Right around the time my trip on the rails had passed its halfway mark, I was met with this sudden question and set up with a start. My eyes searched for the one who asked it. There, standing in the aisle, was a single woman with a radiant complexion, beaming down at me. She wore a coat with overlapping buckles secured slightly above her breast and appeared to be in her mid-30s. Gingerly bending her knees and pointing her finger at the empty seat beside me, she asked,
"Do you mind?"
With a tilt of her head, she indicated the rear of the passenger car, where swirling smoke saturated the air, and softly muttered,
"The smell from the tobacco smoke is just dreadful."
Wordlessly, I nodded and dragged my bag from its place on the floor, moving it over by the window to the opposite side of my feet. The woman expressed her thanks and delicately sat herself down in the seat next to mine. For being a perfect stranger, she talked on endlessly, and I appropriately reciprocated the conversation by saying that I was on my way to the liberal kingdom on business as an orbment specialist. Her story was that she was on a mission of mercy for the church and had an errand to fulfill in the border city.
"Just so you know, people sometimes refer to me as sister."
She went on.
"Of course, it's just a nickname."
She recrossed her black leather boot-clad legs and let out a sort of suppressed titter from the back of her throat as she made mention of this. Sister Carnelia was her nickname. We continued on in this fashion, subjecting ourselves to a variety of idle banter, and as the time drew on, the sun overhead began to dip in its arc, crossing the celestial meridian and descending into the west. Each time the moving train cleared a grove of trees, the entire vehicle, passenger cars and all, was bathed in a warm apricot hue, flooding into the cabins, creating a majestic spectacle. I gaped at the coruscating effect, and in doing so, locked eyes with Sister Carnelia, right at the moment the brilliance of the sinking western light seeped into her rich brown irises, causing them to give off an exquisite rubescent sparkle. The glimpse made me wonder if the origin of her nickname was somehow related to the color of her eyes being likened unto the luster of a polished carnelian stone. The train gradually began to decelerate, and Sister Carnelia returned to her original seat in order to collect her bags. As a matter of habit, I checked my bag and orbment and found both the junk paper-covered package and the magical device fastened into my trousers' inner pocket by a series of chain stitches, exactly where and how I'd left it. A woman's voice came over the intercom system, announcing that the train would be arriving on schedule and that rainy weather was to be expected at our destination. At the conclusion of the announcements, a number of disappointed sighs could be heard coming from along the rows of seats. Raindrops pattered against the windows outside as the looming silhouette of the overcast city came into view. The station's signal lamp emitted an angular light, which was scattered with a refractive effect by the falling droplets of water. Then came a spine-chilling metallic sound, followed by the jolt of the Orbital engine's reversing thrust as the locomotive at the front of the train lurched to a halt. Over the loudspeaker came another announcement, asking passengers to ensure that they did not leave their baggage behind, and with that, several people stood up and crowded into the aisle. Watching a station worker in uniform as he waved a small flag amidst the falling rain, I picked up my bag and rose to my feet. I crossed paths with Sister Carnelia as I attempted to step into the aisle, but when she tried to step aside and allow me room to pass, she suddenly tripped and fell forward. Grabbing onto my shoulder for support, she picked herself up and with an embarrassed smile, let me by. I gave her a short bow in line with general etiquette practices, then headed for the exit ahead of her. Following my lead, Sister Carnelia shuffled along closely behind me, so close in fact that it felt as if she would step on my heels. Something about it just didn't feel right. Instinctively sliding my right hand into my pocket, I searched for my orbment, but the brass feeling I had grown accustomed to was nowhere to be felt. In an instant, I felt my arm being twisted behind my back by someone or something with incredible strength. The sleek sound of a blade being unsheathed, and then a warning prick of the tip at my back, indicated the seriousness of the situation.
I have what you're looking for, Toby,
whispered Sister Carnelia in an almost inaudible tone, her lips barely moving just behind my right ear.
Let's not try anything either, shall we? I'd hate to see your afternoon spoiled any more than it's going to be.
And to show that she meant business, Sister Carnelia slightly altered the angle of her grip on my wrist, causing an explosion of agony that sent sparks flashing behind my eyes. Chapter 4: Human Fodder. Sister Carnelia spoke to me in a tender tone as she sent a wave of immense pain rushing through the whole of my right hand.
I won't have any trouble with you, now will I, Toby?
She asked. Far from eyes just brimming with tears, I nodded my head in consent as the salty streams of water ran down my face. Satisfied with my answer, she loosened her grip, and I felt the pain vanish as if it had all been some sort of illusion. With a wry smile, she further added,
Don't get me wrong, Toby. I've been sent here to protect you by the goddess herself.
This is what she said, while instructing me to keep my eyes focused on what lay beyond the window glass. Yet, there was something about the way she pronounced the last syllable of my name that really rubbed me the wrong way. Little by little, the line of passengers slowly began to flow out of the train car. Prodded on by Sister Carnelia, I inched forward while keeping my gaze on the platform through the passenger car window. Down the stairs which led to the front ticket gate were the figures of those men from earlier this morning, the 3 thug-like passengers who had been loitering near the large horsehead emblem of tile at the Imperial Station. A muffled laugh echoed from her throat as she too noticed them.
Well, isn't this a warm reception party you've got going on?
Cocking my head, I quietly pleaded.
Give me back my orbment.
Sister Carnelia said nothing. Members of the crew bid us farewell as we stepped through the exit to disembark the train onto the lead-colored platform below. Angrily, I thought to myself,
Damn it, what's wrong with these fools? Can't they see what's going on?
I shut my eyes halfway to protect them from the drizzle whipping against my face, and I unhurriedly descended the wet set of stairs, a half pace at a time. Sister Carnelia moved along behind me at precisely the same length of stride. Below, the group of thugs waited expectantly at the bottom of the stairs, waited for me no doubt. Contemplating the rate at which I was going, I ultimately believed it was only a matter of time before I would be handed over to the enigmatic group. I caught sight of their soured faces as the distance between us grew smaller, and felt the heat of my left hand, tightly gripping my bag, grow in intensity until my palm began to sweat profusely. Hitting the midway point on the stairs, Sister Carnelia suddenly whispered in my ear.
Keep your eyes on the ground, Toby.
I did as I was told, and cast my gaze down upon the tips of my boots, stained to a darker shade by the rainwater. Then, right at the moment I let out my breath, I felt a deep sense of pressure just below my shoulder blades as I was forcefully shoved forward. Droplets flew from my saturated fingers, and my world turned upside down as I tumbled down the stairs and slammed back first into the deep of digging. With a muffled crunch, I felt the painful sensation of my ribs crumple under the weight of my body and then return to normal from their severely compressed state. Two of the seemingly military men who were hit as I toppled down the stairs, like an avalanche unleashed onto a pair of young saplings, absorbed the transfer of force and were thrown into a large puddle, collecting on the ground nearby. Shrieks erupted from startled passengers nearby, more shrill than the high-pitched sound of the railway brakes from a decelerating locomotive. As my world spun wildly about me, I lay there, the chill of the tiles seeping into my back. With a concerted effort, I rolled my eyes to the left, where my arm remained in an outstretched state. By some act of the goddess, I had managed to keep my tight 5-finger grip on the bag I had been carrying. In an effort to get up, I slid into a prostrate position, keeping my chin in contact with the ground. Making a low visual sweep of the vicinity, as if my life depended on it, I noticed the military-like physiques of the men had vanished from view. The only figure I saw standing above me now on the platform was that of Sister Carnelia, and on her shoulder, as if she were merely hefting a sack of grain, was one of the men. Turning in the direction where the train sat in its motionless state, she lobbed the unfortunate man down onto a set of empty rail tracks below. By this time, I had risen to one knee while keeping the other planted firmly on the ground in a half-standing position. The world in front of me was still swaying, undulating in my wavering eyesight. My head slowly rocked back and forth with it as the double vision of Sister Carnelia's boots approached me. Then, with a strong grip, she tugged on my hand. For some strange reason or another, when she did this, I failed to notice the unpleasant feeling that her hand wrapped tightly around mine brought.
Let's go, Toby,
she instructed in an authoritative voice. Nearly dragging me, she pulled me to my feet, and before long, we were hightailing it out of there. The onlookers made quite a commotion as they moved hastily out of the way in a determined attempt not to be caught up in the middle of our flight path. The bag in my left hand swung helplessly, knocking against my thigh. After clearing the ticket gate, Sister Carnelia finally let go of my hand, but a sickening, slippery sensation came with it. Looking over at her, I realized that the stomach-churning, slimy feeling on my hand had come from the bright red blood which stained both of hers. I peered back over my shoulder in the direction of the platform as I continued to run, but the figures of those 3 men who had been waiting for me at the station were nowhere to be found.